some absentee from the music class on this coming Wednesday, and I just wanted to let you know, in case of anyone who hasn't signed up for the music class and wants to go, that we can take 3 or 4 additional people Wednesday morning at 9 and Wednesday afternoon at 1 at my house. If anyone's interested, I've got copies of what the program's going to be, so you can know ahead of time. Is anyone interested? Okay.
We're doing
I have been looking forward to this morning, as I look forward to almost every morning, but this one is extra special. Through the years, my wife and I have had a very good friend, and from time to time, she would give us some of her poems. Miss Freddie Hearn is going to read for us this morning some of her poems.
It's a great honor to be here this morning. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And what I write is just the way I feel about things. And I hope you won't find it too boring, but I won't take very long. The first one is the way I feel about America. I am sprung from pilgrim fathers, fearless servants of the Lord, steadfast, true, through persecution, with their hearts of one accord, wanderers from their native homeland, finding refuge where they could. Never once did their faith waver, always for their God they stood. I am now a mighty nation, in power and riches I have grown. Did they see my glorious future when they stood on Plymouth Stone? I have many sons and daughters who have made their country strong, but this crew of their divided cannot keep its strength for long. Plymouth Rock, a mighty symbol of that mighty rock above. Plymouth, the rock the pilgrims stood on. God, the rock they served and loved. And the next one is about my feelings if I see an Indian arrowhead. I can see a mighty hunter as he creeps with stealthy tread through the forest on the hillside and beside the deep, wide river. I can see him aim his bow, fitted with this very arrow from his quiver. Was it a swiftly running deer or some smaller furry creature that he carried with such pride to the family cooking fire? Wild goose, some other bird perhaps, a majestic eagle soaring ever high. I can see a brave young warrior as he walks the stealthy tree through the forest on the hillside and beside the deep, wide river. I can see him raise his bow fitted with this very arrow from his quiver. Was it some tribal enemy he stalked with skill and cunning? Did he give a shout of triumph as he drove his arrow home? Did he sing of victories past and dream of other victories yet to come? I can see an aged chief sitting by the council fire, pondering with other wise men matters mighty and profound, thinking of their youthful manhood, of the lives the newly hunts, of the brave and mighty warriors, men of courage and renown, knowing that they soon must follow all the brave men gone before them, from the river, from the forest, to the happy hunting ground. Rock, taken from Isaiah 37, 7 verse. That is a strong and mighty rock to which we all may flee, for refuge God deserve, a fountain from that rocky spring with living water pure. When hunger for his righteousness, our yearning hearts has stirred, then will our starving soul be fed with manna from his word. If on the winding roads of life, lost and confused we roam, that living guidepost, God our rock, will guide us safely home. Our hope, that strong eternal rock, forever will endure. I have not built on shifting sand, but a foundation sure. Still waters from the 23rd Psalm. Still waters, pools of perfect peace, where I can rest and dream. Drink and my weary soul restore from that life-giving stream. My shepherd leads me gently through ways I do not know. I follow him in utter trust because he loves me so. I am but one of many sheep, but each one knows his voice. He gathers us from many lands. We follow him by choice. Our every need he does provide. He gives us of his best. Goodness and mercy shall follow us, eternal life and rest. The road to Jericho, as we all know about the Good Samaritan. As I went down to Jericho, I saw a man I didn't know. He was beaten, bloody, terrified, but I passed by on the other side. As I went down to Jericho, I saw a man I didn't know, stripped and wounded and left to die, but he was nothing to me, so I passed him by. As I walked the road to Jericho, I saw a man I didn't know, beaten, robbed, and left to bleed, but I saw him as a neighbor in need, who or whatever he might be, Jew or Gentile, meant nothing to me. Compassion and love was the call to heed. He was my neighbor, and he was in need. My Father's house. From Luke 15, chapter 11, verse. I will return to my Father's house that I left so long ago, for the fleeting thrills and the tawdry charms of a world I didn't know. For the pull of the world is strong with allurements on every hand, and the souls it draws with golden cords, it fetters with iron bands. Our worldly hopes are often vain, and the things we are taught to trust, fame, riches, pleasure, grasped in our hands, are hollow and turned to dust. I was sated with pleasure, surrounded by friends, and I never walked alone. But the world was a cold and lonely place after my wealth was gone. My Father's house is bright and warm, with love he longs to share. Why feed my soul with a husk from swine, when he has enough and to spare? I will return to my Father's house, forgiveness is all I ask. I will not seek the face of a son, only a servant's task. But the Father's arms are open wide, to embrace all the erring ones. The weary, hungry, tattered, and stained are all his beloved sons. I will return to my Father's house. He welcomes all who come. A feast is spread, and the angels rejoice when a wandering child comes home. 3 gifts for Jesus, from Matthew the 2nd and 11th verse. 3 gifts were brought to Jesus, the child of humble birth, who brought 3 gifts, peace, joy, and love, that holy night to earth. 3 gifts were brought to Jesus, myrrh, frankincense, and gold, by wise men guided by a star, the promised sign of old. Gold for the purity he brought to a world beset with sin. Gold for the riches he left behind to be turned away from an end. Frankincense for the life he would live, as his humble road he trod. For a pure life lived in obedience is incense unto God. Myrrh, symbol of death. To die he came to earth, and the shadow of the sacrifice hung over him from birth. Myrrh, symbol of death, with its bitter, acrid taste, the living death of a godless life, the tragic gutter waste. 3 gifts we bring to Jesus, body, will, and mind. He gives new life, new vision, and we leave the old behind. Three gifts we bring to Jesus, the sacred Son complete. What he has given, wealth, talent, or fame, we lay it at his feet. 3 precious gifts the wise men brought and offered on bended knee to a king who loved a captive bird and died to set it free. This is when I try to express the way we feel about Christmas. Christmas is a merry time, a loving time, a giving time, in memory of one who gave his life that all men will be saved. Christmas is a joyful time, a happy, cheerful, singing time. Shepherds heard the angels sing, now throughout earth the glad news rings. Christmas is a solemn time, a holy, meditating time. If Jesus never had been born, life would be hopeless and forlorn. Christmas is a loving time, a kind, forgiving, friendly time. We have such glorious news to tell. Rejoice, God lives, and all is well. Jesus the healer. His name is Wonderful Counselor. He guides us in all that we do. But he is known by another name. He is Jesus the healer, too. He is the mighty God who created the universe vast unknown. Yet he humbled himself to bear our sins, and he claims us as his own. He's the everlasting Father, and he gives us a Father's care. But he does for us what no father could do. He hears and answers prayer. He's the Prince of Peace who is coming to create earth anew. He will heal the strife that divides us, as only he can do. He is the beautiful rose of Sharon, balm of Gilead that makes whole. The saving balm with power to heal the sin-sick soul. He gives ease to the pain-racked bodies and peace to the troubled mind. He comforts the brokenhearted, for he loves us and loves is kind. He is the burden bearer, a friend who is faithful and true. Cast all your cares upon him because he cares for you. He is the tree of life by the river John saw in that city so fair, with leaves for the healing of nations. No grief or pain will be there. No sorrow can enter that city, and our tears will be wiped away by our Savior, Jesus the healer, the truth, the life, and the way. And this one is about his entry into Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, your king has come to you. He rides upon an humble beast. Give him his royal due. Is this the heir of David's line, in whom the ages meet? Yes, listen to the shouts of praise that fill the farmland streets. Not as a conqueror he comes to a throne of glory and power, but as a sacrificial lamb to his final bitter hour. Behold his majesty divine, creation's sovereign Lord. Praise him, or else the mighty rocks will speak with one accord. The shouting multitudes are gone, the streets are dark and still, and kneeling in an olive grove, he bows to his Father's will. A cross without the city wall, on a bare and windswept hill. A heavy stone, an empty tomb, these we remember still. Not grief-filled memories of the dead, with vain and bitter tears. The visions of the risen Christ stand towering over the years. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, your king will come again, the conquering Lion of Judah's tribe, in righteousness to reign. Judas Iscariot. He followed me for 3 long years. We trusted him with the curse. I knew, as the others did not know, his name would become a curse. We walked the roads of Palestine, hungry, thirsty, kingdom of this world. He followed me until he learned that all his hopes were vain. He craved riches and power. I offered a life of sacrifice and pain. That fateful night, from the upper room, he went his coward way. He felt no grief, he felt no shame for the one he would betray. A servant called beside the road before its tracks were his. He spurned the love I offered him and betrayed me with a kiss. Now this one is about what I thought of as a modern Christmas. We all love the one by Eugene Field about the night before Christmas. But this is the night before Christmas, 1992. Was the night before Christmas, all through the high rise, the creatures were eating hamburgers, french fries. Were the kids nestled snug in their beds? No, indeed. Some were watching cartoons, some had comics to read. Were the stockings all hung by the chimney with care? No, for one single reason. No chimneys were there. Some were playing $200 Nintendo games. Others watched their role models seeing riches and fame. Some were computer hacking to find deadly deals, to find shady deals, with no sort of mystery or intent to squeal. Each creature was doing his or her thing, as full, as free, and as happy as birds on the wing. Meanwhile, at the North Pole, trouble was brewing. Elves pausing their labor, the reindeer stopped chewing. Santa was pacing the floor as he wondered, when I made all those promises, could I have done this? Condominiums, high-rises all over town. Central heating, no chimney for me to climb down. Some guarded by keen-eyed security men who may shoot me on sight. How will I get in? As I go to the door, if I go to the door with this pack on my back, they may try to arrest me for peddling crack. One other problem I fear may arise, getting my sleigh through these traffic clogged skies. I never had trouble, all I did was whistle, and I flew through the air like down from a thistle. Now, jets, helicopters, airplanes, satellites, can Rudolph's red nose do the job for tonight? I fear me I bit off more than I can chew. All you Santas out there, I need help from the crew. The crew all responded, he sped on his way. All gifts were delivered, and I heard him say, this is Santa Claus speaking, to friends far and near. Merry Christmas to you, and a Happy New Year. And the P.S. to that. One bright spot in Santa Claus' puzzling quandary, no sooty chimney still saved by his laundry. And the last one is a prayer for the new year. It was written in January 1980. Spirit of God descending upon our hearts today, unite us in your service. Lord, show us the way. In the beginning was darkness and chaos on every hand, but your spirit covered over the deep, and your word brought forth the rain. There is darkness and chaos now that only your word can pierce. Speak to the spirits of men, Lord, who are so violent and fierce. Give us wisdom and understanding as we enter a new decade. Speak as in the storm of Galilee. It is I, be not afraid. Thank you, and I want to thank you all. I'd like to thank Mr. Winn for his kindness and for honoring me so much. And I hope I haven't bored you too much. Oh, no.
Thank you very much. Poetry is harder to write than prose, and sometimes you have to concentrate a great deal more. And by leaning forward, I could hear every word. she is as modern as tomorrow, because you found that when you said, the conclusion, he was in a quandary, but by not going down chimneys, he wouldn't have to have so much money. Well, I say she's as modern as tomorrow. She likes to read, she likes to keep interested in things, and I hope she continues to write poetry. Now we're going to take a jump across the river, and we're going to talk about another Alabama author. Now, you know, if I stand before a group of fine-looking people like this, I'm compelled to ask some questions. You know, I taught this for years, so that's a carryover from my teaching. How many of you have ever heard of Maud Lindsey? How many of you have a Maud Lindsey book? How many of you have 2, 3, 4, 5?
I don't really remember now. I've got a bunch.
Oh, boy.
Don't have all of them.
About 3 months ago, Mr. Anderson, Charles Anderson, called me, and he said, do you know where I can get some Maud Lindsey books? I said, Maud Lindsey books? Of course I know where you can get some Maud Lindsey books. He said, will you lend me some? Now, I knew I would be using mine. Now, these are not groceries. They are my books that I prize high, and I'll show them to you in a little while. And you may touch these, because Maud Lindsey, well, everybody should know about Maud Lindsey. How many of you heard of Maud Lindsey when you were growing up? Did anybody ever hear of the Maud Lindsey kindergarten? How many of you know where it is? How many of you know what's going to happen to it? It's going to be moved. It's going to be moved because the street is going to be widened, and that building is going over to the Brandon School campus. Well, it's a wonderful thing. Now, Mr. Anderson said, can you get me some of the books? I said, why, certainly. Now, I didn't take mine because I knew I was going to be using them up here. But I went over to the archives. They have every one of them in the archives down over at UNA. A long, long time ago, I had to, teachers get off the track, so I'm off the track again. A long, long time ago, I was going to write a paper on Maud Lindsey. So I went to see Mrs. Lynch. I said, I would like to take out all of the Maud Lindsey books. She said, you may not. She had been a sergeant, I think, in one of the organizations, and she carried over her sergeant's. I said, well, what am I going to do? She said, you can read them here. I said, will you turn the pages for me? She didn't like that a bit. So, well, anyway, I read the books. Right. Well, I was beginning to acquire some of my own. But there they. How many of you have an idea of about how many Maud Lindsey wrote? 3, 4, 10, 15, 16, 12. That's it, 16. Now, I don't have all of them, but I have some. Well, Dr. Warren, who is the director of the library, said that you can get some out of the archives. I went down to see, and do you know, what do you call the person who's in charge of the archives? I used to say archivist. It's archivist. I try to keep my ears open to see what I can learn. Come on, everybody say archivist.
Archivist.
Well, doesn't it sound odd? It does. It's a new word. Well, anyway, we borrowed 6 books. Mr. Anderson sent all the things to an authority in Nashville, who is something about, I don't know. He tells people what to publish and all that. So we sent 6. He came back and said that Little Missy has dialect, and some of the others should not be because they're a little hard to read. And Jock Barefoot, which has Scotch dialect, he said, well, we won't use that one either. But he decided two. One is the Adventures of Alice. Have you ever read it? Do you have a copy of it?
I don't think I
It's about a little Arab boy who is I have a copy of it, I'll show it to you. A little Arab boy who is looking for his grandfather in the desert. It's a remarkable story. But how she could take her imagination over there, over in Arabia, well, it's good. Now that's one. The other is Silverfoot. Do you have a copy of it?
think I do.
It's a story of a horse, a dark horse with a silver foot. It goes back to the Yankee days, and the Yankees stole it and brought in the Civil War. Now those are the two. And I said, well, Mr. Anderson, I'm so glad that those are going to be published, because all of the people, and particularly some people, have been in Miss Maud's kindergarten. How many of you know anybody's been in the kindergarten? Well, it's wonderful. I mean, as adults now. Well, everybody would want a copy of Miss Maud's book, her two books. What he said, now, when should they be brought out? I said, well, I know when they should be brought out. They should be brought out on her birthday. Her birthday is the 13th of May. She was born in 1874, and she died in May the 30th, 1941. Now, those two books are going to be issued, brought out to the public on the 13th of May, 2013. Miss Maud is a person that people have respected for a long, long time, and very few people call her Maud Lindsey, because most people put Miss in front of it. And I want to see, I have a paper that I want to read you. When a person achieves the acclaim that Miss Maud did, we generally do not refer to her as Maud Lindsey, but we refer to her as Miss Maud Lindsey. And through the years, that's what we have called her. As a child, I heard many adults discuss Miss Maud in her kindergarten. It was always her kindergarten. But I never met her until after I was graduated from college. One of my uncles, who lives in California, always sent my mother a check before Christmas to be divided among us 4 children. Books, since my early childhood, had been described by me, and this fascination was greatly increased through college, through the grades, and all the way, and even now. When I was a child, I used to cry because I couldn't read. Now I like to cry because I don't have any time. I don't know where the time goes. I'm retired, but anybody retired? Well, of course. Or you find that time goes quickly. It really does. Generally, we overlook the opportunities which we have around us. In Milner's drugstore through the years, Miss Maud Lindsey's books were sold for $2.50 or maybe $3. Sometimes it was $2. A Maud Lindsey book. Now, if you have one, take out a little more insurance, because I don't know whether the intrinsic value is so very much, but the sentimental value is. Because we do not have a book of Miss Maud Lindsey in 1930, I brought one of her books in Milner's drugstore and drove over to Sheffield to ask her to autograph. Do any of you have any autographed books in your home? An autographed book just means more, because the person who wrote it is there with you. After she wrote her name, she came out on the porch. It was in the winter, but it was a pretty day. She came out on the porch and we talked a little while. She asked me in, but she was busy and so was I. So guess what she said? what is the child's name? Who is going to receive it? When I told her that it was for me, she really did laugh. And she said, I'm really complimented. Several years later, I attended a luncheon which was given to honor Miss Mull. After eating and chatting for a while, we, at our request, heard some of her wonderful stories. I'll never forget it. Her listeners were delighted and kept requesting more and more and more of her stories, which reflected her keen insight into childhood psychology and her charming way of relating to the tale. Later, I told her that I had read my delightful copy of The Storyteller, and that's the one I'll show you that's autographed. She laughed again. She thought that was funny, that I wanted her autograph. Nearly everyone enjoys hearing stories and good stories. Miss Maud saw the need, and especially among children. She put her observations and imagination to work and published her first work, Mother's Stories, in 1900, 93 years ago. Miss Maud told her stories to children and watched and listened to their reaction. She said that she never had stories published until after they had been read or told to children. More Mother stories followed her first book. 13 school readers quickly included these stories taken from 2 books. A Story Garden for Little Children came next, and The Storyteller, 12 stories in one book, was published in 1915. Bobby and the Big Road, a long story in one book, appeared in 1920. Little Missy, another book-length story, appeared in 1922. Contains beautiful descriptions, a mystery. Have any of you read Little Missy? Any of you read it?
I don't remember.
What you did, what you had.
That's one I have, and I have Bobby and the Big Road, I remember.
Bobby, you remember those two? Well, as I call out some more, they'll come back. Don't let them get away from it. In 1924, a new book of Miss Maud's Silverfoot. I'll get it back. Oh, that's all right. Thank you. One of my former students gave me that when I was still in college, and his father said, well, you may need it someday. And I carry it around because I think I might need an octogenarian who might need it to get up. Guess who the octogenarian is? You're looking at. Well, she kept on writing and writing and writing because she had so much to tell. The Joyous Travelers. Do you have that?
I don't think I have.
It's a beautiful book. It's modern. It's modeled a little bit like the Canterbury Tale. I want to show you that. I have one. And then the other is The Joyous Travelers and The Joyous Guest. She wrote that in collaboration with a friend of hers. Very few people know about those 2 books. Did any of you see the little book of poems that was published by the kindergarten society's kindergarten group? Did any of you see that just last year? Republished. Born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in May the 13th, 1974, Miss Maud Lindsey was a child of several of many children in the family. She liked to read. She didn't go to school till, I don't know, she was about 10 years old. But she read and read and read. How many of you know who her father was?
Governor Lindsey.
He was Governor Lindsey. Tell me more about him. Where was he born?
He was born
Scotland.
in Europe,
He was born
Scotland,
in
I believe.
Scotland. He went to St. Andrews, and he was a lawyer, and he came over here to practice. And about 21, and he was the only foreign-born governor of Alabama. I thought that you might be interested in that. His daughter inherited his crusading spirit and his love of literature. From her Alabama mother, Sarah Miller Winston, came the great love of the South. From her family came the love of people, especially children. Early in life, when she was about 21, she went to teach in the kindergarten down in East Florence. She lived over in Sheffield, Tuscany, and then Sheffield, and she'd come over on the streetcar every day. She'd get off at East Florence, she'd walk all the way up to school, she would build a fire, and the children came gladly. In 1898, Miss Maud was asked to teach the first free kindergarten in that cotton mill district. Now, I don't think any of you have ever been to a cotton mill. I have. There were two big cotton mills here. And one of the teachers, a sociology teacher, took us, or what's called civics in those days. We went to the cotton mill. The lint was terrific. It makes me sneeze every time I think of it. Well, the women worked, I mean, sometimes 10 hours a day, and the children would be in the kindergarten. And Miss Maud would keep the plate. One little girl said, "Poor Miss Maud, I'm going in the first grade next year, and she won't get to teach." Meaning, of course, that she wouldn't get to be with Miss Maud. They really did love her. This is something that Miss Maud wrote a long, long time ago. I think you might be interested. When I was a little girl, I played in the garden, the loveliest garden in the world. And now that I'm a storyteller, I like to write about gardens. The garden in Little Missy was my grandmother's. I did not go to school till I was about 10, but I was taught at home. We had a great many books at home, and I read everything I could put my hands on. Before I was 12, I had read the Waverly novels, Sir Walter Scott, and most of Dickens, and Les Miserables. Think of that. Well, some people haven't read them when they were 40 up there. Well, see, David Copperfield is still my favorite book. One of my playfellows was Helen Keller. She and another little girl and I played together in her aunt's garden and orchard. The other little girl was a very grave child, and Helen aunt called her Fact and Be Fancy. Fact grew up to be a school superintendent, and I grew up to be a storyteller. And Helen is world famous. But we did not dream any day